Yeah. Yeah, like whatever time. Except for those ones that
Yeah.
Yeah, like one
All right. So this will be the lecture, first lecture. This one was a bit interesting for that.
Yeah.
So what is that? Slide each or what is that?
One slide.
We got involuntary and coerced interventions. I have to say, this is not a topic I've spent a lot of time reading about or studying. Anyone want to take a guess why?
Because you don't like it, because it's not very psych-rehab oriented.
Bingo! But when I read this, I learned some stuff to say, share my opinions about this. So yes, you were right, Brianna, to speculate that I might not be the biggest fan of involuntary. What? Why don't we like involuntary things?
Because in psych-rehab, it's all about giving the person the choice to make.
Yes, but what about even in real life? Do we like involuntary things?
No, I
You
like
always
wanting a
be forced to
choice.
do anything.
Yeah, it
It's my
sucks.
freedom.
I hate being told what to do. I hate it. And actually, I'm not a big fan of telling other people what to do either. I was, I think, actually a pretty good supervisor, but I have to go back to it. I wasn't a big fan of it because I had to tell people what to do. And I'm a parent now. I tell my 3-year-old what to do a lot. I'm like, I can't wait in some ways for them to grow up, so.
That never ends.
Yeah, that's what I hear. Every parent that has a kid that's older tells me that.
Never.
But I'm just like, because I know how it feels. Anyway, an independent side in us, we are, it's innate in our humanness that we want to be able to make our own decisions. Self-determination is a value, psych rehab, and that's what it means. To be able to self-determine is to be able to say, I'm going to do this. And when you got this going on, you say, I'm going to do this, and somebody else turns around and says, no, you're not. You're going to sit right here, you're going to go there, you're going to go here, you're going to take that med, or you're going to whatever they tell you to do. So, just me as a person, I don't like this. But I understand the reasons behind it, and we'll explore them a little bit more today. And as a psych rehab practitioner, whoever mentioned that first, I don't like it either, right? I came from my very first job, I worked at Bridgeway. No, I'm sorry. No, they don't do this stuff. I worked at SERV, Behavioral Health Centers. Anyone heard of SERV? Yeah, they're a pretty big residential organization that at times have claimed that they do psych rehab. I don't know, been a while. But that was my first job in the field. And we did some of these coercion type things where it was like, if you don't do this, you're not going to get that. And it was really like artificially based, right? If you don't do your chore tonight, you're not going to get your ice cream. Or if you don't do this extra chore because you didn't do your chore yesterday, now you got 2 chores. If you don't do 2 chores, you may not get a cigarette.
That's why I like it.
Exactly.
I have a
Yes.
question with that.
Yeah.
It's laws. I think it's one. I want to be biased with it. I always like that, but I believe it brings some type of discipline.
Okay.
No.
No? Well, I'm glad you bring it up. I like alternating opinions. So that's one of the things that kind of this chapter shed some light on, is that when you actually ask people in recovery their opinions on some of these things, a good number of them have positive things to say about involuntary and coercion. To say, I needed this to kind of I needed this kick in the ass to say, this is serious, or, I was just out of control, and it was only after somebody had some control over me that I was able to sober up enough to be able to make a real decision, or, let my psychotic symptoms calm down a bit so that I can think a little bit. So, I don't think, I think there's definitely a place for all different types of intervention, right? I think the main takeaway that I would say is that this should be like some of the last things we do. So people haven't responded to more of the interventions aimed at self-determination and helping the person decide for themselves what kind of treatment like or not. So that's a little opening on these. So what's the difference between the two? So involuntary means physical, legal restrictions of the person themselves, their property, or decision-making ability. All right, so involuntary restriction of themselves. What might that be?
Self-dependent, that someone had a choice for them.
To do what? Like, what's an example of being physically restricted?
Like the straitjacket?
Yeah. It could be like actual physical, I can't move, or I'm going to lock you in a room, or I'm going to commit you to a psych hospital. You can't leave. Well, so that is not a restriction, but that might relate to their decision-making ability. I don't want to take the meds. Judge says you're taking your meds. Judge, and then if you violated that, consequences would be up to the judge. Yeah.
What are the advantages of actually putting someone in a straitjacket? Because I don't see that.
I don't know the evidence, so I don't want to.
If someone was to tie my hand down, I'd freak out.
Yes. So, from what I've heard, and like I said, I'm not very informed on this, so I don't want to present myself as a subject matter expert. The outcomes on using restraints is not very good. Meaning it does not lead to better outcomes, behaviors. People don't get better.
It's the worst.
I would imagine so. So a lot of these were born out of like an old world type of mentality, right? And as we have moved forward as a society, we have, I think, grown more humane treatment of people, even in their worst, most desperate times.
I've also seen them use medication.
Yes, I have too.
And it was horrible.
Yeah.
I actually advocated for that person when I was there because the person could not sit in a chair.
Right.
They brought him to do activities and he couldn't do it.
So they have physical restraints, which would be, wrist cuffs or something on their legs or their head. And you know what? If somebody is completely out of control and the danger of the staff is at risk, I can understand in cases like screening centers or involuntary institutions, the need for them very temporarily. The horrors you hear about people with these things for like days and treatment. But if somebody's out of control and they actually, if you don't restrain them, are going to whack their head against the floor and give themselves a concussion or hurt somebody, and that's their intention, that might be what somebody needs to do. There's also chemical restraints, what you're talking about, which is a shot of Haldol in the ass, and they become a zombie, or Valium, or some kind of tranquilizer. So that is, again, used to, I think, probably be more commonplace in the past. It's becoming less as we become more aware. But yes, that is, I would say, more prevalent in today's world still than the physical ones. Physical is pretty obvious to everybody when you see it, right? But it's harder to see. So I used to see examples of this quite often. I would be working with somebody, this could have been in a group home, supportive housing, partial care, any kind of place I was working. Somebody goes in the hospital, I go to visit them, and they're like, drool coming out of their mouth, glassy eye, can't remember what I'm saying, and it's like, wow, they're just too thinking. But you don't know if it's because they were a behavioral problem, and this is like a consequence for that, or if the psychiatrist is truly trying to help the person, and this is a stabilization period, You know, it's like, obviously if they went into the hospital, there's a good chance maybe their medication wasn't working for them and that the psychiatrist would be trying something new. But it's hard to tell, right? You don't know if it's the doctor trying something new and he's really genuinely trying to help the person, or if they're, you know, some kind of chemical consequence to behavior. You know, they hit somebody or they were acting out. So, yeah, this was really sad to see. You go to the hospital. All right, and we have coerced. Oh, so we have, you know, restriction of themselves, their property. Can anyone give an example of that? Yes.
So where like they take their cell phones or their pockets, their wallets or.
That could be an example, yeah. Garnishment of wages, I guess would be considered here. You know, taking somebody who had some kind of fine or you know, legal obligation to pay something. And then we have coerce. So strategies to engage people into treatment by threatening the loss of choice or freedom if they don't comply. So like blackmail. If you don't do this, I'm going to do this to you. It's, you know, it's threatening somebody. Again, why don't we like this? Who the hell likes to be threatened? Yeah. What are you doing this weekend? I think I'd go out and get threatened. Have a good time, have a good weekend planned. All right, so again, like, it's sort of shed a light on me reading this chapter. It's like, okay, these have a time and a place in really extreme circumstances. But it's important to differentiate what these are from what these are not. These are interventions. This is something you do in response to a behavior. Somebody threatening to whack their head against concrete floor. I'm going to intervene by subduing them somehow to prevent them from hurting themselves. This is not to be confused with treatment, where that would be what? Something written into their treatment plan. You know, these should be really emergency type use interventions. You know, and any kind of community mental health center, staff are not allowed to do any kind of physical restraint or chemical restraint. Staff aren't authorized to administer a shot when the person's acting out, or, you know, lock them in their room or tie them to a chair. There are facilities that do allow this, but again, it's in very controlled environments. So that's, I think, where, you know, what the distinction is from like responsible use of these interventions from abuse. And that would be if it's like sort of written into a treatment. It's like, you know, a behavioral consequence. So when do we use these? You said, like, somebody is about to hurt themselves and this is the only way we can intervene, or they're going to hurt the some other peers or the staff that are trying to administer the help, or they can be put into place as a result of legal consequences. So we will get into some examples of those. Now they're on the next slide. So again, you think involuntary, restricting personal choice or freedom and removing the self-control of the person. Versus coerce, you're threatening the loss of personal freedom. And when you're trying to employ these, again, there are people that, you know, will thank you later, more or less. But I think that when they are put into place in an habitual way, like treatment, they lose their effectiveness very quickly. Because people are not going to be motivated to engage with you in treatment if they know that this is a distinct possibility that these things are going to happen on a regular basis, right? Would you be hanging out in the partial care program if you knew your rights were going to be restricted? You know, it's like, not if I didn't have to. I wasn't getting anything out of it. So let's move on. Any questions on these things? How many people out there have seen something like this? Anybody? Nina.
I see it all the time when I go to emergency.
Okay. What do you see? People tied to the wall?
Well, first I would see like a person
when I come in, I would see like a person agitated.
Yeah.
For like, but the most part is, why did you take this? I really wasn't doing anything. My family said, but I wasn't. And then you would see a nurse saying, oh, be quiet, or, someone abrupt talking to them. And then they get agitated more, and then they instantly call security, and then they're restrained.
Yeah.
And then the person gets worse. Then they come and they give them drugs.
So yeah, I've spent a few days in an emergency room myself. In a sense, yeah, there is a little bit more of a militant style as they triage, right? The head nurse or head person, those have a certain amount of decision-making ability. And you can bet that is security is on their, their red button, their bat phone at the drop of a hat. It's like, ding, 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 remove them from my palace. Take them to the dungeon.
It's really disgusting.
It is disgusting. And you see the lack of shared decision-making there, right? There's very little of it. And I think the people in the profession, emergency room workers, I don't want to disrespect them, they got a hell of a hard job, would argue, I ain't got time for this, or I'm trying to consider the safety of the entire unit, but I certainly think there's room to grow. Sounds like you agree in terms of.
I just feel it's an angry place too, from my
It's very tense.
And the thing about it is that all you need to do is communicate with that individual. Because if I'm in the same room or across the hall with somewhere close, then if I'm not hooked up myself, then I try to go, start a conversation, and it calms the person down as the way the nurses or the staff are talking to them. I find it extremely disgusting.
So, all right, so the role of these, so what can we expect, when can we expect these to be employed sort of on an ethical basis? Safeguarding against impaired reasoning or judgment. So getting back to substance abuse, right? Certainly drugs out there that impair judgment, right? Especially a lot of the ones that you're seeing kind of become fads in recent years, bath salts. I've heard about bath salts.
Yeah.
Each other's faces.
Right.
Sorry.
And then there's
full-blown psychosis. This is not some friends hanging around smoking some weed, deciding that they're going to go about, and do things that are going to cause these types of preventions. These are, a lot of times unknown chemicals, or chemicals intended for other uses, aka baths. Or spice is another one. Synthetic marijuana.
isn't it the one that's causing people to become zombies?
Yeah,
right now?
bath salts and spice both have been in the news in the last 2 years for people getting psychotic from using them. There was a somewhat famous case about 5 years ago, I think, when it first became a big deal. I'm trying to remember the town though. It was in Union County, where it was a murder involving somebody killing somebody else because they were psychotic, side effect of being high in bath salts. And spice, that one is scary because they were seeing a lot of people that were, had been in the legal system on probation, that were subject to urine screens that still wanted to use. So they're like, hey, I'm going to use this synthetic marijuana. They get in the bodegas, wherever. And it doesn't show up as marijuana on a urine screen. So, I could use this. It's just like marijuana. I don't, it's dirty. And it's not just like marijuana. It's, again, these repeated use, especially, causing these psychotic breaks. So, when somebody's in those kind of states from psychoactive drugs or just symptoms of a thought disorder, or even could be a mood disorder that's highly exacerbated. You have depression with psychotic features or bipolar with psychotic features. We need to safeguard that person. They are not able to make a good decision, right? If we leave them to their own devices, it's like leaving my 3-year-old son, like walking out into traffic. No, probably has some sense of that. Or somebody else that is not where they think they are, would need to be protected. So we have to kind of take it over in some cases. Engaging somebody who cannot otherwise be engaged. So when somebody's stuck in the hospital or in jail, for a treatment team that's been trying to get this person help, this can often be somewhat of an opportunity. Because out in the streets, they were very unreachable. You know, they were dodging the person's phone calls or missing appointments that had been scheduled or just not picking up the phone or whatever. When they are confined, the treatment team has a bit more opportunity to get in front of them and offer them treatment or engage them in some way if they're not ready to accept treatment. So just slowly start the communication therapy process. And it's an opportunity for motivational interviewing. If the person's view is, I don't have a problem, you know, that's when you're going to be using MI, right? Somebody that's more in pre-contemplation or contemplation. And it also, or, this would typically be an or opportunity for MI or CBT, not usually and. If they know it's a problem, if they are in a more preparation or action phase, you might be using more cognitive behavioral strategies. And so, all right, great, these roles. So now we know the role of these interventions. How does psych rehab do this? We settled this a little bit, right? Psych rehab is in favor? No, not in favor of coerced interventions or involuntary interventions. Why? What goals does it violate? Or values or principles? Person-centered?
Personal goal, freedom.
Okay. So the one I mentioned, what was that one? Shared decision-making, which is the principle. Self-determination is the value I was thinking of. So that the one is the big one to me. If I am in recovery, and I'm working with, my counselor today, thanks, Amanda, for helping me. And I want to get better. She's going to, kind of say, what do you want to work on? And I'm going to decide. I'm going to make decisions here. And even if Amanda's not super behind what I want to work on, if she's a good practitioner, she's going to kind of roll with it and try and figure out other ways to sort of impart what she might believe might be helpful for my recovery, if so need be. Certainly it'd be possible that I could surprise Amanda, right? I've certainly been surprised where people set goals that I think are unrealistic or just, I'm like, why, what does this matter to recovery? And then they achieve it, I'm like, oh, look at that. They were really motivated. I didn't give them enough credit. So when you can self-determine, you really are the driver, right? And the counselor is sort of the partner walking alongside you, ready to offer suggestions based on that first request for them. So when we're using involuntary actions, it's like, well, I'd like to do this. And then it's more Amanda saying, well, actually, we're going to do this. It's like, well, I don't really want to do that. Like, well, that doesn't happen. There's other ways to handle this stuff, too. We're going to talk about that. So if you do have to do or use these interventions. So let's talk about different things involved here. So legal issues. So not for the reason that you would use them, but what about legal consequences of using them?
Like those staff?
Yeah. You're onto it. How could the staff be impacted legally when it comes to the administration of interventions?
I would imagine there's some policy, like if someone's being symptomatic or they're out of control,
Yeah.
they have to use one of the interventions on them.
Right. So there's a procedure and a protocol within that organization, the hospital prison, to
And
use them.
if they break that,
And if they break them, there could be legal issues, right? I mean, we hear about this kind of stuff. Think about, and now we move to the next one, political. again, restraints, if you think about some of the headlines in the news related to, what you're seeing on TV politically in terms of police overstepping their bounds when taking involuntary measures to apprehend people. You can see some of the issues play out when somebody has that much control over the situation. It's potentially out of hand, leading to potentially legal issues as well. So it's all involved with liability a lot of the times. When the person's freedoms are infringed upon, somebody else is now liable. If my rights are not being infringed upon, if I am self-directing, back to working with Amanda, and Amanda is in a psych rehab state of mind, not using these interventions, if I've done F up, she's not liable. Because it was what I wanted to do. Unless there was some kind of neglect there or unethical treatment, but we don't know that she would do that. I'm self-directing. I wanted to do it this way, and I had some kind of consequence. And Amanda said this might not be a good thing for me to do, but I wanted to do it anyway, and now I have to deal with the natural consequences, which are a big thing that psych rehab is in favor of. Because that's what would happen to any one of us if we decided to do something of our own free will and effed up. We would have the consequences, whether they be legal or political or ethical. So ethical, a lot of times it might be staff being unsure of how or when to implement these, or the situation just being misused. So moral, what do you think about this?
That they're doing it, but in the back of their mind, it doesn't feel right.
Yeah. So if you are sort of, all I just think about it, I was like to take a job in Trenton Psychiatric Hospital. Decided to transition my career again. It might be hard for me due to my moral and ethical beliefs to say, all right, I guess I gotta go restrain that person now. Even if I did think, all right, I need to restrain that person because if they don't, they can hurt themselves. And I wouldn't want that on my conscience. It still may not feel good morally for me. So definitely an issue there. Just remembering something. I hope I have that. Maybe to take a minute of break between because I have a video I need to show. But I think I figured it. So, and then clinical issues. Last one. So thinking about the organization that implements these, what type of clinical issues? Sprouting up. The agency uses involuntary treatments. Person responds. What kind of clinical problems could arise?
Does never enter recovery, actually want it. There's no.
Could hinder the recovery process. Move slower. Why? Why would it move slower?
Because they're not ready to change. The person itself, not the
Okay.
person who is voluntarily intervened on, they didn't.
So yeah,
Either don't think they have a problem or have a problem and don't want to go further.
And in a sense, the intervention does, we talk about stage-based treatments, right? You're not going to use an intervention designed for somebody in active treatment on somebody that's in pre-contemplation. So this, in a sense, is the intervention not suiting state of change, because whatever the person's stage is, they usually are not in a stage where like send me to Trenton Psychiatric Hospital against my will. Put me in a straitjacket now. I'm on it. Give me that extra shot of Haldol. I'm on it. So I'm thinking though of when I think of the therapeutic alliance, again, I read those accounts of people that had the perspective of, in looking back, this was helpful for me in turning my life around. But I think in the moment, in the short term, there's got to be a lot of distrust there, in a sense, between people that are the people in charge and the people that are underneath their care. Not always, but it's got to hinder the clinical therapeutic process. So we have this paternalistic view of society that we are coming from, or we're slowly evolving out of. Of society initially said when we were locking up hundreds of thousands of people against their will because they had this mental illness. We owe it to them to take care of them. It's our job as society, to take care of them, and then you end up with a very custodial mindset where people don't actually rehabilitate. So, as I said, that's changing. Okay, so the different categories of interventions. I gave a few of these examples. So protections for person and property might be payship. Anyone ever have experience with this? No? On the verge of it? Oh, great. We'll talk a little bit. You have experience?
Yeah. I'm interested with the clients that have people
Okay, what kind of place was it?
was a day program.
All right. So the day program had people coming to the program getting services, and they had payees set up for them?
Yeah.
Was it family members?
No.
It was
Okay.
employees of the agency?
Children family.
Okay.
And the individual and he was ready to he was doing all the training and everything, and he was so hard because the agency asked for so many papers and a letter from the psychiatrist saying that person was
Oh, to get the payee off.
and the psychiatrist
Yeah.
didn't want him to give him the
Oh, it's
letter.
very hard to get payees.
I was just wondering if that was ethical. Like if you're in a program, right? And the person that works at the program is a payee to another person.
Who's the
is that-
person?
Right.
What's the problem? You're right, but let's talk about it a little bit more. So what's the issue you see?
How well do you, the issue I see is how well do you really trust that person? And in the situation I'm thinking of, the person spent money.
What do you mean?
Like, the person was a payee of another person, and it was just like accumulating. The person got a large sum,
Yeah.
and the person thinks that the money is there, but we're finding out, well, I'm not finding out, but let's just say the money's
Oh,
not
so the
there.
potential for unfair practices.
There you go.
Let's
That's better.
just call it what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
all right.
Trying to clean it.
So here's what I'll say. I totally agree with the first point in that the dual relationship of, let's say, again, me and Amanda. Amanda's my counselor. I'm getting different kind of rehabilitation services from her. We're building this therapeutic alliance. Oh no, now Amanda's my payee too. And I screwed up and didn't follow my treatment plan. Now Amanda has the power to withhold my funds, So she's in a dual role, and it impacts the clinical alliance. The same way, a housing organization, we've talked about supportive housing in the past. If not, you'll hear about it in other classes, where there's a separation of housing services and clinical services. Same reason. You don't want to have that hanging over the person's head. It's like, well, if you don't do what we're going to say clinically, I'm going to take your housing away, or I'm going to take your check away. In terms of the second point you make up about the potential for theft, I'd say that's more of a potential with family members acting as payees than agencies, because agencies are going to have the payee doing so much documentation and paperwork because they're worried about that stuff. They will be should be overwatching it. Whereas a family member, between the family member and the family member, the person might not be keeping the best records. But I've worked in agencies that had payees, and they had to do so much accounting and account for every last penny. That's just my experience. I'm sure it happens. But the agencies I worked at, they envisioned the potential for that to happen, and were super tight about it. Every month everything had to be, what's the word, reconciled. And if there was any kind of missing money, it was caught right away. So
It's very hard to have their own money, with their own payee. tener that money. It's just-
So yeah, I've seen this in agencies I work in, and it's not the best. I could see the agency thinking, well, if we're the payee, we know, especially at a housing agency, for example, we know the rent's going to be there, right? Housing agency sees somebody doing well, might say, you know what, they're doing better. They want to be more independent. Let's give up the payee shift. You know, good psychiatric practicing organization should want to be giving it up, right? But other agencies that may not have that focus might be wanting the security of knowing the rent's there. And in that case, denies the person the ability to sort of learn on their own. And it happens. I've seen people get the payee shift taken off. And then the first month, get that check and fall flat on their face. It's like, the tendency is like, oh, we screwed up. We, take steps to correct this. And it's like, sometimes that person screwing up that month is the biggest lesson they could have learned. And they needed to learn it. They needed that experience, even though the other family members or counselors or whoever has been talking to saying, you can't do this, it's gonna, and the person saying, I know, or I got it, and they still screw up, and that could be the strongest incentive to change, experiencing that failure. Denying that ability for that person to experience that is inhibiting the rehab and recovery process. All right, so guardianship, being able to, being a guardian of somebody else, so that's like being able to make decisions. And power of attorney is more of a similar type of protection, but in more of, this one has more of a legal aspects, legal decision making. Guardianship is more medical decision making. So if somebody's like in a coma and can't make decisions for themselves, they may have a guardian. And that person might also function as power of attorney, making legal decisions as well, or they may have two different people. Mandates for treatment. IOC, anyone know what that means?
Voluntary.
Yes, involuntary outpatient commitment. Involuntary, so against somebody's will. Outpatient, meaning they're out in the community, not locked up in a hospital or prison. Commitment, they have to do something against their will. They're being committed. So this is on the books in New Jersey, and basically what it says is a judge has the power to involuntarily commit somebody to some kind of outpatient treatment. So let's say, I don't know, maybe it might happen in the case of a discharge from a hospital. It's like, you're going to get discharged from the hospital on the condition that, it's also, I'm sorry, no, I'm confusing them with conditional discharge, but they're similar. So this might be in response to some kind of legal issue, involuntary outpatient commitment. Judge says you must go to Bridgeway Partial Care 5 days. Be committed to outpatient treatment. Or you must see your psychiatrist on a weekly basis and take your medications that's prescribed. You're actually being told legally you have to take your medications. And as I said, it is in New Jersey. Involuntary hospitalization, so that's somebody, suicidal or homicidal, danger to themselves or others, going to be hospitalized against their will, versus the person that could be suicidal saying, I am suicidal and I need help, please take me to the hospital. This is the person saying, I'm suicidal, I'm going to go jump in front of that train right now and you can't stop me. We have to potentially physically restrain them. Conditional discharge, person getting discharged from a hospital or from a prison, on the condition that, so we'll let you out, but you got to go to treatment, take your meds, whatever they say. And then orders associated with illegal behavior. So somebody gets released from jail because they committed a crime, they might be on probation, be checking in with somebody, have some sort of set of conditions that they have to meet the probation officer or the parole officer, is a more stringent version of probation. And then restraining orders or legal interventions in response to some kind of threatening behavior. So restraining you from visiting a property or coming into contact with a certain individual. So all categories of involuntary or coerced interventions. Okay, so as I said, we're starting to come out of the dark ages. Things were a lot worse in the past, and we have our attitudes have changed. And as I said, the perception of people, when you talk to people that have been have experienced these, some wanted it and are thankful later on, and some it's all right. It is what it is. I'll deal with it. To me, it's like, all right, if I need it, I need it. What's important to me is like getting the quality care that I ask for. It's like, all right, I'll deal with this if I have to, if it means me getting good quality rehabilitation services. So it's not just a blanket, this is bad for everybody for always and forever. It certainly does have its place, and there certainly are people that are advocates for these types of interventions. So the negative pressures, you have essentially, like I said, the coerced types of things are threatening people to say, if you don't do this, I'm have this hanging over your head. And that is a negative attitude that we need to sort of work on. So this is what I was saying is there are kind of two ways to inform somebody that they are going to be subjected to involuntary treatments. So, okay, and now we're in a screening center, and I've been brought in because I'm a danger to myself or other, and screens me, and she sees, yeah, he definitely needs to be involuntarily hospitalized. She consults with a psychiatrist, and the three of us sit down, and we go to scenario one. And they show like, okay, here's one way that this unfolds. And it's a man being like, you're going to the hospital right now. You don't have any choice in the matter, and you won't be seeing your family until we say it's okay. And you're going to be taking these meds. And I'm sitting there like, I'm not going to do it. And then I'll get up to punch her, and then they restrain me, and then they shut me ass. It's like, and blackmail. You don't do this. This is what you're doing. All right. Whenever we would go back, it's like, here's the alternate way that this situation could have played out. And I walk back, and she walks back, and it's completely the same situation. Her sit down with the doctor, and they talk to me and say, you know what, Derek, listen. We consulted and we listened to what you had to say. We really understand what you're going through. It must be terrible to be feeling the way that you're feeling right now. And unfortunately, for your safety, we are going to have to keep you here for tonight in the foreseeable future. And I know that's really got to be hard for you right now to be dealing with. We want to make this as comfortable as possible for you. So if there's anything to do within our restrictive environment here and make it a little bit easier for you in this transition, let us know. Oh, okay. So now the person is like, well, this really sucks. Is there any way you can get me this at least? Maybe a little bit of compromise within the normally restrictive system. Maybe they can, right? Hey, I can see you're really, have you eaten today? Maybe I can get you something to eat. And the person sees that, yes, they are telling me something. They are basically making a decision on my behalf right now. But now I see where it's coming from. The way it was presented, it wasn't shared decision making. I wasn't going to be able to talk my way out of it in that sense. But at least it came at me with empathy and with respect and dignity. It sort of makes the process go a little bit better. So there are definitely two ways to approach it. Those are the extremes. Probably a lot of practices are somewhere in the middle. Okay. Okay, so real quick on this slide. There have been some improvements, evidence has shown, related to mental illness outcomes when looking at involuntary or coerced interventions, mental health only, substance abuse only. When looking at the evidence, they have found a lot of times the interventions have been unrelated to treatment outcomes. Meaning, we if you compare people that received these interventions with people that did not receive them, they tend to fare about the same. So they don't seem to have any impact. Close monitoring is another version of sort of more the course where the person is intensely supervised in the community, haven't really much experience with this. The person can request it or it can be voluntary. We definitely do want to match the interventions with the stage of treatment. Again, engaging with the first stage of active treatment. And then there is a good table on page 255. I'll grab that real quick because I didn't want to type it all on the slide, but there are some good sort of rules of thumb. This is the music text. Okay, these related to close monitoring. So do everything possible to preserve trust, maintain unconditional acceptance and positive regard, claims necessary to blame the disorder. Confine the use of involuntary or coercive interventions to the most dangerous situations, working with the client to try all voluntary options or moving on to the involuntary. So it's things like that. It's like the best practices, not things that are necessarily evidence-based yet, but after looking at repeated studies of this kind of thing, these are the things like if you have to use these practices are the best rules of thumb. So that's on page 255. When you are evaluating the need to use these forms of these interventions, the reason that you're using them in treatment is these three things. So you definitely, the number one reason you use them is to make sure the person is safe or the situation is safe. Again, you might use this as a time to cultivate motivation. So when you have them confined, you have the chance, you have them right in front of you to have an impact rather than if they're in the community and somewhat difficult to engage. And if they are in sort of somebody else's control for a period of time, it might help them develop their own sense of self-control. Okay. I am gonna play a video. Let's see. Just to see if there's anything else I really want to focus on here before I play the video. Okay. But I'm probably not going to spend too much time on these last couple of slides, but I'm going to play this Tarasov video. So Tarasov was mentioned in the case. It's a court case. Let me see. I think it was pretty well done because it was sort of a little bit of movie effect. But this is a description of the Tarasov case and the reason behind the Tarasov law, which is sort of a duty to warn. If somebody tells you they're going to hurt somebody, they have a duty to inform that person or some sort of emergency services that somebody's in danger.
Potter met Tatiana at a New Year's party.
Decided that he really liked her, and he started to kind of stalk her a little bit. And then
They shared a kiss, and Potter thought more of it than it was, and he tried to pursue Tatiana to go out with him, but she didn't want to.
Tarasov is important in the psychological community because prior to Tarasov, there was no mandate. There was no law stating that the psychological professional had to warn the potential victim. Now, however, it is mandated. But they're still stuck between a rock and a hard place because if they breach the confidentiality of the patient, they can be sued for that. But if they don't warn the potential victim and the potential victim dies, they can be sued for that.
Potter's a little insane in the head, and eventually got to see a psychiatrist. He told him about everything they was going to do, and the doctor couldn't really do anything about it other than tell the campus police about it. And they held him for like 24 hours or so and just let him go. And he just went ahead and killed her.
I think that it really was more a case of cultural differences. In his country, for his woman to shun his advances would have been considered very, not taboo, disrespectful, and he would have had the right to harm her.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he was from another country, but that doesn't, the fact that he was brought up a different way. But if you come to the United States, you still should, you need to follow the laws of the land.
Tatiana Tarasov was an undergraduate student at Berkeley.
Prosenjit Potar grew up in India in a small Delhi village and was a member of the Untouchables caste, a very religious Hindu group.
He went through the India school system. The schools he attended did not allow contact with women, and he had no dating experience.
At the age of 26, he came to the United States to get a graduate degree in naval architecture at Berkeley. Potar and Tatiana met in a folk dancing class in the fall of 1968. He became infatuated with Tatiana Tarasov after kissing her several times. He thought that they had a special relationship. After Tatiana rejected his advances, he became very depressed and began acting in a bizarre fashion.
Tarasov kissed Potar several times, but didn't think there was any kind of relationship.
He told a friend he wanted to blow up Tarasov's dorm room, and the friend referred him to the University Health Center. He began seeing Dr. Lawrence Moore in August of 1969, and he told the doctor that he wanted to get a gun and shoot a woman. He never named Tatiana in his sessions with Dr. Moore, but she was easily identifiable to the doctor.
Potar entered Tarasov's home and shot her with a pellet gun and then stabbed 17 times on October 27, 1969. Because they have mandated the duty to warn, mental health professionals have found ways to find out if the patient seriously is homicidal, and they ask specific questions.
Like finding out, have they ever thought of hurting anybody, and if yes, who, how they're going to hurt that person, what their plan is, and how if they've carried out any part of the plan.
He had told the psychiatrist that he had planned to kill her, but the cops picked him up and they let him go because they figured he had changed his mind.
Potar began seeing Dr. Lawrence Moore and told the doctor that he wanted to get a gun and shoot a woman. On October 27, 1969, he shot her with a pellet gun and then stabbed her 17 times.
Stabbed her.
Part of the significance of this case is that the psychologists or the psychiatrists who are practicing now, for around that time, they were worried that the fact that they were going to have to warn somebody, what happens if they take it wrong and the person says, well, I'm going to kill somebody, but the psychiatrist doesn't think it's warranted to warn that person, they could get sued now because of this particular law. And before that was in place, they could still get sued, but it wasn't as prevalent, people. I mean, I think this is the first case that actually went to court to somebody, one, where the Supreme Court of California said, now if you're a psychologist and one of your patients threatens somebody, bodily harm, bodily injury, you have to, it's your duty now. It's not just you can tell them if you want to. It's your duty now to tell them, to warn them somehow, to call the police, to call the person who is being threatened. It also had a lot of impact on domestic violence cases, where if there's a domestic violence victim who is in counseling, the psychiatrist or whatever has to, figure out, okay, well, how bad is it at your place, because they have a duty to warn the police about the spouse or the domestic violence victim.
It makes perfect sense. If there's a guy beating his wife day in and day out, and goes to the psychologist and tells him, my dad beats my wife, my mom, and everything, they should be able to do something about it. They should be able to step in and take care of the situation.
I think psychologists were probably doing this before, like warning people, like if somebody comes to me and says, I'm going to kill this person, and I've got the gun, and I've got the knife, and I've got the time and the place. I think your only drawback as a psychologist at that point is patient confidentiality. Does that outweigh, I know this person is going to kill somebody. Could I live with the fact that person actually got killed if I didn't tell them about it? You know, I think that was probably already happening. I mean, there are a lot of people, you know, a lot of psychologists who totally believe in the fact that you're my patient, I'm not telling anything. I know you're going to kill him, but I'm not going to tell him. I couldn't live with myself, that's just me, but there are a lot of people, you know, who could. You know, there are a lot of people who, that's their deal.
I don't know if I can do that, that's messed up.
Yeah, it is messed up, I agree. You know, they lose their stuff. You know, they lose their license, they lose their practice.
There should be
they
steps
lose
that
their living.
There should be steps that are set aside that should be going to help them do that without losing their license and everything. To save somebody's life.
Well, now there are. That's because of the Tarasov case.
All right. Anyone heard of that before? You had. Okay, good.
Over a quarter of a century after the Tarasov ruling, many psychologists still find themselves between the proverbial rock and a hard place in deciding when to breach confidentiality to warn potential victims of imminent danger. Since the 1976 ruling established the duty to warn and protect, therapists have been caught in no-win situations. They can be held liable for a patient's violence or be liable for breaching the same patient's confidentiality. Medical health professionals are torn when state law forbids breaching confidentiality except in child abuse cases. There is a general psychology rule that implies that the private privilege ends where the public peril begins. As we study this case as a class, you should take away from this presentation the gravity of the decisions mental and health professionals may occasionally have to make. Although this case has more recently been applied as a model in cases other than homicide, the conflict lies in the arbitrary way the decision must be made to warn authorities and potential victims. If you are considering entering into the mental or medical health fields, when would you feel the duty to warn?
I would have to say that, you know, this doesn't come up often. I've worked in community mental health for 12 years, 13 years prior to joining the university, and I did not have to ever do this kind of duty to warn. I did have to, I think, in one case, and it wasn't actually myself, but I had to alert the compliance officer where I worked about a situation where somebody was, it was somebody that was registered under Megan's Law, I think, was living with somebody I was working with. You know, they were like boyfriend and girlfriend, and the woman had kids in the house, and he was sleeping there. So that was a situation where it was like we were aware, like we didn't know of any like, we didn't have any proof of abuse or anything, but it was like a violation of his Megan's Law status. I don't think he was like able to like cohabitate with children or something. So that was a situation where it's like, oh, I have a duty here to inform somebody. And in most cases, you know, if you're a counselor, it's not going to be you doing the direct informing in most cases. You're going to be informing your supervisor, or if you're a supervisor, you might be informing the compliance officer or somebody that is going to make that call and say, okay, yeah, that situation was a little different from this situation too, and then it wasn't the time sensitive, like this person's going to harm somebody like in the next 5 minutes kind of situation, which would necessitate more like emergency services type of situation, or perhaps using on-call. You know, it may not be a situation where you just wait until, you know, Monday if it happens on the weekend kind of thing. So if you ever suspect that you may need to warn somebody in any kind of case, always ask your supervisor. Don't go out and warn the person. Don't do the warning before checking. Would be my advice there. The final thoughts. So there are a few other types of specialized treatment programs that are in the community. So it's interesting, you know, you think about it, when people are hospitalized long-term or jailed, there should be like ample time to do discharge planning, right? You know, in some sense, like what else they should be doing. I do, you know, have to hand it to social workers that have very overinflated caseloads. So sometimes they just have more people than they can possibly service. And that's why discharge planning is substandard. But you should think in the situation where the person has a normal caseload, a caseload that they're able to handle, that the person, they certainly have enough face time in front of the person if they want it to do good discharge planning. There are, as we've talked about, lots of people with co-occurring disorders in the criminal justice system and very few resources. There's a table that summarizes their common features in the book. Jail diversion programs are present in New Jersey. Bridgeway has one. So jail diversion programs minimize involvement or avoid minimum involvement in the legal system, set up by community agencies. So an example at Bridgeways would be somebody gets picked up for some sort of crime related, it's usually petty crime or, you know, misdemeanors. While they are in prison, they show obvious symptoms of having a mental illness. The prosecutor or somebody from the legal system reaches out to Bridgeway jail diversion and refers this person to them. Jail diversion counselor comes to the jail, meets with them, meets with the prosecutor in the court, and they work out a deal whereby the person goes into treatment with Bridgeway in exchange for their case getting dropped or minimized or whatever. So it's basically a way to avoid the legal system sorry, swallowed myself. It's a way to basically avoid and get the services that the person actually needs, since even the legal system probably admits at this point they're not going to get good quality psychiatric services while in jail. Mental health courts and drug courts essentially do the same thing, trade prison time for treatment, and have some good evidence behind them. But these are systems set up by the judiciary system itself. These are not systems set up by agencies in the community. So that's just the distinction there. And they're both in New Jersey. So any questions on involuntary services or coercion before we get into our MI topic of the week? Yes.
I just had one going back on the link for it.
Yep.
You were talking about interventions raising problems, and I just wanted an example of political, because that's the one that I didn't.
Okay, so example might be person is experienced. Wait, let me fix this first. Now that I know how to do this. Okay. Oh. All right, so the political example. I am working at an agency, and somebody in my organization, that's weird, a staff person does something that they shouldn't related to involuntary treatment, you know, some kind of case of abuse or whatever. Press gets, you know, becomes a press issue, gets out into newspapers, and now the agency is sort of blackballed from getting funding from regulatory because they have this record of mistreating people. So that might be an example of political consequence. Yep. All right, so I can see where this.
You swap displays.
But I didn't see it on there.
So you gotta act like it's an extended screen, so if you like go all the way up.
I can't see my mouse on there. Can you? It's not this. This screen looks different than that one. Okay, so we're going to spend about 10 or 15 minutes on these slides. I only have three here. So we'll go over the content, talk a little bit about my thoughts on this, and then we'll do a group exercise and head out. So this topic is all about sort of the best practices in how to give somebody information. There's definitely a wrong way. And if you've ever been on the receiving end, you probably have felt this. You ever feel like somebody's giving you advice, but it's like not coming from the right place in their heart? You know, it's almost like patronizing, or you're just like, why are you giving me advice when you don't? You know, there's a lot of different things involved with that. So it is common practice to confuse counseling with advising. You know, telling them you should be doing this. It's not really the way we want to be working with people. It's really helping people figure those things out for themselves. And that's what a lot of relational interviewing in practices have sort of gotten to, right? Get the person talking about the change and the reasons for the change themselves, and they can oftentimes talk themselves into changing, essentially. So, all right, so here's some overview. So when you are giving somebody information, when you want to give somebody some kind of education, right? I want to tell you about this deep breathing exercise. I don't know, whatever it might be. Because you think, you know, you're coming from the right place here. You see them struggling, you may have benefited from it, or you saw somebody else you worked with benefit from this great treatment, and you want to give them something to help them. You know, coming from the right place in a lot of cases. Sometimes it's more authoritarian than you would like, but sometimes a person is giving the advice because they generally want to help, right? But you want to sort of ask the person, hey, is it all right if I tell you about this thing? You know, think back to, again, that when you were given advice you didn't want, unsolicited. You know, wouldn't it have been nice to have been offered the options, like, to turn them down? It's like, no, I'm good. I don't need it. Got my fill for today. So when you're offering the info, you can say, hey, is it all right if I, you know, talk to you about this thing, or maybe give you this worksheet that I have, or, you know, sort of ask permission and offer it, not say, hey, you need to take this, or you should read this, or anything you should, anything that starts with that. You might want to do a little detective work ahead of time, going into your meeting, and find out and ask around, is this person actually looking for help right now? Before actually giving them, you know, not to just assume that they want it. All right, that's pretty straightforward. Ask for permission, or what we're getting at. This is what I want to spend some time on. Provide info in the context of peers. Who wants to try and explain to me, like, I'm 5, what that means?
You get on that person's level, so like don't share a bunch of information like at like such a professional level. Just get on there.
Okay.
How they would speak, how they would, not that you would know how they would understand, but.
All right,
Put it
so
in layman's
that is
terms.
a little different than what this is, but that is true. You do need to kind of speak to the person at their level, right? You don't want to use words that they're not going to understand, or, you know, talk in a way that makes them feel like, oh, this person thinks I'm dumb, you know. But that's not what this is. Providing info in the context of peers. Anyone else want to take a stab?
Is it giving examples like benefiting from previous understanding, or ways that they can incorporate different programs to recover?
A little bit closer, but not quite.
I think, from what I'm remembering from the reading, this would be saying, I've had somebody in the past who went through this, and this is, you know, this, you might find their experience helpful.
Okay,
Sharing
yes.
with them.
So it's basically the information you're providing is at a similar level to the other people in that person's population. So let me give you an example. It's a little bit difficult. So if you were talking about the person's cigarette smoking habit, okay? And so they were, generally curious about quitting smoking, right? It's like, yeah, maybe you're not sure. And they might ask some questions like, how hard is it to quit smoking? Or, do you work with a lot of people that have quit? The information that you're going to give is going to be in context to the other people that are sort of in that person's same boat. Other people that have a mental illness and a cigarette addiction. You're not going to be giving them info in context to the general population of people, where the cigarette smoking rate is, 10%, whereas in mental health, it's probably 40 or 50%. So it's a different context. And so, so providing info, say, hey, I have worked with people that have quit, and some of the things that they've used have been these things, because you have some familiarity, because people you haven't worked with. So it's sort of not judging them against an unfair sample, in a sense, comparing them to comparing a person to say, you can do it because I've seen other people in your same situation do it as well. Does that help clear that up? Hope so. Giving people permission to disagree. That shouldn't be surprising, right? One of the central key features is rolling with resistance. You're not going to challenge people, say, oh, I'm sorry. That's actually not the case. You're not going to be really winning them over in terms of the therapeutic alliance. You're going to be going out into a lot of disagreement, especially when you're in the stage, right? Pre-contemplation or engagement. You're not there yet. They haven't fully committed. A lot of times when you're doing MI and you're in this information sharing phase. So give them permission. Be like, it's totally fine if you don't see it this way. These are some of the things that have helped, other people I've worked with. Or it's like, I don't think that's going to work. I wouldn't be like, well, you haven't tried it yet, so you don't actually know. Wouldn't really be a good response there. Have many options handy. So don't show up with one option. You're going to be giving information. Put a little bit of work into giving people more than one way to solve the problem. People like options. Don't you like options? Oh, I'm buying a new cell phone and I can get it in 5 different colors. That's so cool. Compared to just having one color and everybody's got, or 17 different memory capacities. You can get 1,000 different cases. People like to be able to have customizable options. Use the person's own statements. So this is not to try and catch people in lies or to say, oh, no, you said, that's not where we're coming from here. But when you kind of reiterate what the person said, so I know you mentioned before, you might say what the person said or kind of summarize what they say. If you did it well, they're not going to be able to refute it. It's like, no, I did say that. Can't refute that. I actually said that. If you did a good job summarizing or if you give a pretty spot on reflection. And the other reason why you might do this is when the person hears it from you, inside it sounds different. It's like, oh, is that what I said? Is that how he's perceiving it? That's interesting. Because when I was thinking about it in my mind, and when I said it, I was perceiving it this other way. All right? So when you're giving info, to be able to say, hey, I remember you saying this. This is why I want to give you this info, because you told me this other thing in the past. That's, in a sense, giving them permission. It's like, oh, I remember this time where you needed this help. I can offer it now if you'd like. okay. Or, no, I'm pretty busy right now, I don't need your help. Okay. Give factual info, not opinions. Much easier to remain the non-judgmental bystander when you're doing it this way. Look, these are the facts. These are some things that have been proven to help people in your situation. And here's the evidence why. And as opposed to, I think this is what's going to work best. Because that's my opinion. And I don't actually have any factual info to back it up. If somebody were to tell me that, I'd be like, oh, okay. Well, I'm going to go over here and look at the factual info. Thanks. Invite them to interpret things any way they wish. I think that we saw a little bit of this in some of the videos we've watched in the last couple of weeks. When you saw the practitioner, especially I'm thinking about the one last week where he brought some results, something that they had done in the past. And I remember saying, it's like, here's the way I'm looking at this. And I don't know if he said it explicitly or if the person made a statement that said, oh, well, I think of it like this. And the person's like, oh, okay, it's not the kind of situation where you want to say, well, no, I'm sorry. You got to really look at it this way. This is the way it's going to come. And last one down here, they're a person too. As I said, I kind of introduced it like this, but, oh no, I'm sorry. I didn't read ahead. So think back to getting information, right? If you're going to sit down and talk to somebody about a brand new topic, you want to have paired and have sort of an organized approach behind how you're going to present. If you think back to a time when you were kind of just given a shit ton of info at once, it's like, stop. Here's an example from my CogRep days. You get lost. This is before the days of GPS, right? You get lost, pull up on the side of the highway. You don't have GPS. You ask a stranger for directions. It's like, how do we get to this place? And the person's like, oh, I've been there 1,000 times. All you gotta do is go down this way, make a left here, and then you look for stop sign right here, then you go down 3 miles. It's like, oh, hold up, stop. You ever felt that? Well, that's what people feel sometimes when you try to give information in a way that's rapid fire. And even if you think it's slow, think about people, cognitive impairments in a lot of cases, are going to have a more difficult time taking it all in. So, how do we prevent this? We look for signs that somebody's overloaded, right? If you see the deer in the headlights, like, you see this face, might be a good hint. It's like, okay, I'm overloading them, I'm overwhelming them. Right, stop. You're like, all right, are you feeling like that's a little too much? Or, maybe we slow down, or maybe I'll write it down for you, or, some way to sort of relieve that information overload. You have some sort of paper to go with whatever you're bringing or talking about. It's really helpful because you might be able to point to things on a piece of paper, read along, or even if they're able to listen and understand everything in that conversation, if they leave with that thing, there's a good chance that they would remember it better because they can look back. There's studies out there, you need to be told to do something 7 times, really learn it. That's why teachers repeat things a lot, especially main things and stages of treatment, stages of change. Hopefully by the end we got them. So if you felt that feeling, you know what that's like, and you don't want the people that you're providing services to have that trying to tell them things that are really important related to substance abuse or their recovery from mental illness. So that was the overview. All right, so I want to share some information with you now. Here are some ways to do it. It's dialogue, people. It's not me going on and on and on and on and on like I am now. This is a lecture. If I had a therapeutic relationship with you, or if I had a rehabilitation plan I needed to cover, I would not be choosing this model of communication. I would be doing more dialogue. I would be working probably individually with somebody. Say, hey, we're going to talk now about this. And the person's going to talk back. You know the Bible. EPE, elicit, provide, elicit. So, I was thinking about talking about the cigarette smoking cessation pill today with you, because I know you talked about in the past you were interested in learning different ways to quit smoking. But why don't you start off by telling me what you know about it? Oh, okay, that's cool. So now I'm going to give you some more information that you didn't know. What do you think about that? Okay, you see what I just did there? I did EPE. So I asked the person to tell me what they know about the cigarette smoking pill, cessation pill, so that I'm not going to repeat the info that they already know. So I'm not going to start off by giving the info. Tell me what you know about it first, and then I'll adjust what I provide to you in response. Oh, you know a lot. I don't need to go through that much. Or you know a little bit less than I expected, so I'm going to have to beef up this part. And now, so I tell you everything I want to tell you, and now you tell me a little bit more about what you think. EPE. Chunk, check, chunk. Give a bunch of well-organized info. So sort of a little different, a little bit of the backwards here. See what they think about that info, and then give a little bit more based on their response. So 2 different ways to approach sharing information. You would choose these based on the person and based on your knowledge of the topic. And, you sort of have to do a little trial and error here to see which one's going to work for you, work for the person, and work for the situation. And then offering and concern. So this is like one of my favorites. So when I have to talk about something that I know the person isn't really probably very comfortable talking about, like some of the motivational interview stuff, it's like, I'm coming at you from an emotion of concern. I'm not coming at you punitively. I'm not looking to punish you. I'm not looking to judge you. I'm not looking to belittle you or be rude to you. I'm approaching you and I want to know more information about how you're feeling about change because I'm concerned about you. And when you come at somebody with that, it's very hard for somebody to keep their guard up for very long as compared to the other reasons that you could come at them, like I said, punitively or just reactively, so and then last slide here, the acronym is FOCUS. You want to give advice, first ask permission. Hey, is it all right if I had some thoughts on this. I just want to know, do you want me to share? Now I'm going to offer you my advice. I'm not trying to persuade somebody. You're just telling them, what you're thinking. Be concise, don't ramble. Use a menu. Provide options. Everybody likes options. So you might have some sort of prop with you. Sometimes giving advice is going to rely on you doing a little prep work ahead of time. So using a menu is basically, like we said, have multiple options. If you're going to be, giving information or sharing, some thoughts, it might be good to have, more than one. And then don't just walk away after you give your advice. Be like, okay, bye. What do you think about that? And go from there. Decide what you do from there. Any questions? No? Okay. So you're going to do 10 minutes of group exercise and then get back together. Come on. So, here we go. Zoom.
That was chapter 9.
Which chapter 9?
Yeah, thank you.
So, I like this activity from chapter 9 because I used to see these types of situations in, look at me. I didn't think you were actually doing that. All right, so here are some bits of advice that need some fixing. So the first, you're going to see a quote of somebody giving somebody advice, and then you're going to get together in your groups. You're going to try and, how did it work? Somewhat needs to be replaced or reworked. Be aware in some situations you may need to start over entirely. Write down how you might spruce up or rebuild each statement. You don't need to stay true to the words, but try and express the ideas being conveyed in each example. All right, so group one is going to do the first 3, and group 2 is going to do the second 3 on the back. So back and front. So group 1, 1, 2, and 3. Group 2, 4, 5, and 6. We'll work on this for about 10 minutes. You need one more, and we'll come back together. I thought I had printed exactly enough, but I have an extra one. So what? What?
There's an abandoned one over here.
You sure you don't want to do that? Alright. Oh, group 1. Alright.